thing. Don't forget to check my website, hi-fi-town.com, for more pictures of original audio from the golden era. And you'll see, I did want to apologize to everybody. Most of my items are listed as out of stock. That's because I do need to check before when somebody inquires. I do need to check stock. A lot of items sell immediately, right away. And so again, send me an email through the Contact Us page if you are looking for a particular item, and I can see if there are any left. However, these things are getting rare and things are selling out. So again, things are listed out of stock sometimes. And this is one I've been meaning to address for a long time. A customer recently requested a pair of the nicest I could find, Altec 288 drivers. And over the years, Altec had very consistent production. They inherited this design from Lansing's 287, which was a field coil originally. And these have a lineage going all the way back to the 1930s. RCA and Lansing had produced drivers like this, and then Altec inherited the design and pretty much kept it the same until the 1980s in design, basic design. But what changes with Altec over the years is materials and techniques and quality and all kinds of different aspects. It improved, it worsened, it changed. Sometimes it was to address design flaws. This kind of illustrates how Altec produced and changed materials. This is one of the very expensive now brass throats that went with this driver. This is solid brass. It's a very pretty and very heavy quality mounting adapter that goes onto some of the tar-filled horns. And you can see here it's got a number marked on it. I'm not sure if this has the 30 number, but anyhow, this is what is used with the 288 and other drivers of the era. And you can see they machined in a gasket for the driver. Now, in the late 19, or probably sometime in the mid 1950s, they switched from brass to aluminum. And so this is exactly the same product. And you can see it now has the modern Altec part number on it here, made out of aluminum. And these are also fairly expensive now. It's an all metal, very high quality casting, but it's aluminum. So that, as you can see, Altec, depending on cost, and sometimes it was the war or material shortages, all kinds of reasons, they went from one material to another, and these things do affect sound. So that brings me to address today's concern, which is the Altec 288 driver, which is certainly one of the world's best large format compression drivers. And what we're looking at here is an Altec 288B, and there's just so much confusion in regards to impedances and diaphragms and everything else with these drivers. And certainly if you're looking for a large format driver, this is one of the best. So what kind of differences are we facing as we moved? This was a very long produced product from Altec, and the parts are generally universally compatible. And so what changes happened? Well, the very first versions of this driver, after Altec inherited the production line from Lansing's factory in the late 1930s, just before World War I, the very first version of this is called the Hollywood driver, or alternately called the red, white, blue driver. Now, the reason it's called a Hollywood driver when it's in its earliest incarnations is I'll have to refer to a product. This is a 288B from the 1940s. The very first version of this driver that Altec produced had in the casting on the back, Altec Lansing Corporation, Hollywood, right here. And it was the same crinkle aluminum finish, and sometimes they were black and sometimes they were dark gray, like this one we're looking at here. And then also, generally speaking, on the Hollywoods, we also have a red, white, and blue decal on the side on the very first version. This is from the mid-1940s, just after World War II. And that's the red, white, and blue decal you're looking at here. And anyhow, this then functionally, right after that, they came out with, in the late 1940s, mid to late 1940s, then this version came along, which was called the 288B. And it also is Hollywood era but it does not have the Hollywood casting right here. So same driver pretty much. Historians could probably analyze it a little further. There are some differences when we go back to the Hollywood. The most valuable version of the Hollywood is the Hollywood version, and the impedances of those drivers run between 20 and 20. The factory nominal rating is 20 to 24 ohms. However, that's where a lot of confusion comes in. The Altec 288B and 288C drivers were factory rated for 24 ohms beginning in the 1940s and until the end of the production, and sometime in the maybe late 1970s. So what's going on here? Well, the Altec, here's a very late model diaphragm here. Let me focus in. You can see it's clearly stated here that the Altec 288 aluminum, model number 20221, 24 ohms. Now this is a very, very modern replacement diaphragm that Altec produced in the 1960s and 1970s and 1980s. And really nothing too much wrong with these. They're very good quality diaphragms. And you can see here they have a very distinct, they kind of did a cost-cutting measure here, which has they reduced, rather than a solid phenolic ring here, there's a cavity to save plastic and material. And they also went to their very common spade connectors here to make replacements easier. So here we're looking at a very modern diaphragm here. 24 ohm, again, this is a proper replacement here. It's no longer made. You can get replacements from modern companies like the Great Plains Audio, but again, their quality is different and that sort of thing. This is a classic vintage diaphragm here we're looking at from the 1980s. So this would be correct in a 288 B, 288 C if you had to replace it. Then going back to the 1960s, we can see here a nice solid phenolic ring here. This is the most commonly seen 288 diaphragm here, and this is they started making them like this in the early 1960s, thereabouts, maybe even late 1950s. And this was in response because the original diaphragm is very finely made and very delicate. And so this is, in general, the most reliable 24 ohm 288 diaphragm that you can do. And now the problem is with it, and you can see here, you can kind of roughly date these diaphragms. Sometimes they have Phillips head screws here, and that Phillips head screws were something that came in the 1960s at the earliest. So, so this here, we're looking at a very old, we'll say second generation 288 diaphragm this is correct replacement for the B and C. And again, it's around they should read around somewhere between 10 and 13 ohms, and that's DC resistance, not impedance. So so we're going to flip this over in here, and we're going to see here there's a copper kind of tone here. Now that doesn't mean this diaphragm is copper. This is actually, let me see if I can get it sharper here. This is a very, very well made diaphragm. And you're going to see these on 288Bs and Cs, 288Bs that have been replaced or updated, or very early C models, which again were produced during the early 1960s onward. Now you can see here the Altec part number, which is 20221. That's a 24 ohm diaphragm, and this is an aluminum voice coil edge wound, but you can see the former is very beefy, and this was in response to a lot of failures that Altec had over the years. Due to rubbing and just, general abuse and service life concerns. So they went with a heavy coating of lacquer, which changed the color of the aluminum, makes it look like copper, but it's not. It is an edge-wound aluminum diaphragm, of course. And again, nothing wrong with these diaphragms at all, but they're not quite as pretty to look at as the very original version. Now we're going to go back to the very first Altec red, white, and blue era diaphragm here, and this is what we refer to as the early aluminum version. Now this is what you would have found in either a driver like this or a driver like this. And now there are some differences when you go back to the very first. Again, these are very valuable. Now we're talking about the red, white, and blue, the original version, as well as these, which is the Hollywood era I refer to them as gold decal drivers, and they were rated in 20 or 24 ohms, depending on what the label says. Has nothing to do with what may actually be inside, and that's a common error that buyers make when they're trying to learn about these things. So, as you can see here, the original, this was the original service announcement from Altec in 1946, and you can see here they do refer to the diaphragm as 20221. And that is, again, what you saw in the very last version as well. The C version, this was a 20221 as well, but it's it's different from the original version. So this is the original version I'm going to take out now to show you guys. And it's very rare to see these in perfect condition, almost never actually. So again, you can see this is the 20221 from the mid-1940s here. And again, you can see flat blade screws. Not a lot to say different from the 1960s version, except when we turn it over, we're going to see that it is a very fine, it's a different kind of former. It's a little bit lighter weight, a little bit less material here, and a very, very finely wound, edge-wound aluminum wire that does not have a lot of coating on it. So that's why collectors go nuts over these. And audiophiles also prefer, depending on what their usage is going to be. Now, when I say depending, a lot of audiophiles should probably stick with the 1960s version diaphragm because it's very reliable. The problem with these early diaphragms is this is a very similar kind of construction to the Western Electric 555 and original Lansing product, because this technically is a faster diaphragm. It's a little bit more finely wound, same impedance, 24 ohms. It should read between 10 and 13 ohms. Now, there are some times when you've got lower readings on these, and I'll have to go into that in a different video, but this is the original version from the 1940s. You would expect no less, nothing else to be found in a red, white, and blue or gold decal driver. If you do see something different in it, it's been replaced or updated due to a failure. So don't pay full price for an original Altec driver if it does not have one of these in it. So this is the original 20221, and now I'm going to move on to conditional type things you do see in these. Now I'm going to see if I can get this focused here. Now this is a pretty nice diaphragm here. However, if I rotate it here, you can see some distortions in it right there towards the edge. Let me see here. Okay, now we can get a little bit sharper there. You can see some distortions right in here, right there. You can see the light catching it. It's a little bit hard to tell. Now, these distortions were sometimes caused by mishandling at the factory. Other times they were damage that happened during handling. Now, unless there's a hole or a cut or some other problem, there's nothing to worry about here. It's just a cosmetics issue. Distortions like that, there aren't any dents. Otherwise, you want to worry about the dome. Now, you'll see some marks in the middle of the dome. All Altec 288 drivers have these triangular stamping patterns in the middle here. That's right here. That was from the actual manufacturing tooling when they were progressively stamping these diaphragms out. But what I'm showing you here are these distortions right here, and that's from a mishandling, perhaps a finger or something like that. No big concern there. This should not, if you're looking for an original diaphragm, you should not deduct too much from cosmetic concerns like that. You want to be more concerned with the resistance reading of the coil and what type of coil it is, because the later coils from the 1960s are far more common and they should be worth less. Not that they're low value or terrible sounding, they just should be worth less. This, to some collectors and some audiophiles, this is a prize here. This is the original 1940s diaphragm. So now you know what is supposed to be in a driver like this. It's okay to replace the diaphragms. It's okay to buy one that has been replaced, but you don't want to pay full price. So we see mistakes here on eBay. This driver here was labeled by the seller as an original diaphragm, and it went for almost $1,500. Now that's about right for an original Hollywood driver. Right now they're bringing around $3,000 a pair, and that's fine. But unfortunately, when we took a look on the inside at what this seller had here, it was not an original diaphragm. This was a 1960s era diaphragm, and one giveaway were these crimp terminals here, which is something that came in the 1960s and 70s. If you see something like this inside of a early driver, then you've got signs that it had been serviced or messed around with. So we can only assume at this point then that this diaphragm was probably replaced. It's a little bit hard to tell. There's a slight coloration difference between the early diaphragms here, and you can see sometimes they have a bluish or a yellow cast. That's the 1940s diaphragm. And when you're looking at these more modern diaphragms like this one here, you can kind of see, I don't know if you can make this out or not, but these had a yellowish cast as well, but they were more of a natural, modern looking aluminum finish. Now, none of these diaphragms here are duraluminum. That's a different topic for another video. These are standard aluminum diaphragms, including the original 1940s unit, but we are concerned, what we're talking about right now is the coil. So again, here's one more look at the replacement one from the late 1970s here. And we're going to take a look here at the edge here. Now we're starting to really see that may actually even be a copper coil there. It certainly is a copper tone. It really has to do with the coatings, and we're seeing an extra larger diameter wire used here, and a big former. So even more differences cropped into these 1970s diaphragms when you have this open trim ring here, this hollowed out trim ring, which is a thinner thing. So everything about this diaphragm is really a cheaper construction. It functions fine if you replace it, but to a collector and an audiophile using extremely low-powered tube amps, and if your budget allows it, you may want to go for the original. But whatever you do, don't pay top price for a replacement diaphragm. Now, so now we're going to look at what am I going to suggest to my customer here. A very nice fellow in Vietnam who's assembling a system of original Altec components. Well, when I began this, it had been more than half a decade since I've dealt with these drivers recently, because the market's been down for quite a few years. And I started trying. He asked for, well, get me the best match you can. So I reached for a pair of 1960s diaphragms and really hadn't really considered, what the market can support for 1960s diaphragms and all of that. But he wanted the best match. So what I'm going to suggest to him is, here's an original Altec 288 driver. It's very nice quality body. And here is a perfect pair of 1960s diaphragms here. Now, these 1960s diaphragms are going to be the most reliable. So if you're looking for a midpoint between quality, speed, detail, collector interest, and everything, these 1960s diaphragms are fine. You want to pay top red, white, and blue Hollywood prices for them. What are they bringing right now? Well, it's April 2018 right now, and here we've got a pair of 1960s, we'll say late 1960s 288Cs that brought $1,700. I'd say that's a little high, but that's what they're worth. Now the body changes the value too. When you've got a crinkle-based body that can be upgraded to a Hollywood at any time, that adds a few $100s. And all kinds of other concerns, but we're looking at here a 1960s diaphragm in a 1940s body, and it's going to be a little bit less than if it was all original. Now, if the customer decides they're using very low powers, very responsible use, not long playing hours, not high wattages involved, or loud volume, and quality is a concern over reliability, then you're going to want to consider the original aluminum unheavily varnished diaphragm, edge wound aluminum here. This is the original diaphragm and gets you arguably and truthfully the best sound. This is the original diaphragm, and this is what Altec 288s are famous for. This is the original one, and it's got a ton of detail. You could even argue that this diaphragm here is going to sound close to, if not as good as, some of the very late model Lansing drivers that trade again for another 2x premium over these drivers here. So the original Altec or Lansing 287 drivers had a rolled edge, and it was a completely different diaphragm, and they sound the best of anything, but they cost almost as much as Western Electric. So there's a complete rundown on the different eras of diaphragms. Don't pay full price. Check the quality. A quick glance, if you're checking visually, if you see Phillips head screws here, you know it's no older than the early 1960s. Just check with the seller first. If the seller won't tell you, don't purchase them. Try to purchase from a reputable dealer who knows what is in the body of the diaphragm. It's overused. You can always check with a DC resistance meter, just like this here, just an inexpensive fluke here type meter, is going to give you a very approximate test of the DC resistance. That tells you nothing about the era. We're talking about, these are all 24 ohm diaphragms. They all should read somewhere between, we'll say, a really rough range of like somewhere between 10 and 13 ohms. They're all going to read the same. You cannot date a diaphragm that way. You have to visually inspect it. So anyhow, thanks again. We'll see what my customer decides here, if he wants reliability at a lower price, or if he wants the top potential detail and originality of the original version. So thanks again for watching, you guys. I hope you learned a little bit something. And this is I'm almost out of these. This is some of the last of the Mohicans here. They're not making these anymore. They're getting very rare and tough to find. So thanks again. Bye bye.